Students, when we read the 17th century history of English literature, we come across metaphysical poets in the beginning of the 17th century, and just after that, we come across Cavalier poets who were writing poetry in the mid 17th century. Okay, who these Cavalier poets are and what are the important features of Cavalier poetry that we want to discuss today. Now, these Cavalier poets, they comprised of a group of poets who were writing poetry in the mid 17th century. Okay, and they were also the supporters of King Charles the First. There was a clash, there was some political conflict going on between the king and English parliamentary, and these poets, they supported the king Charles the First. Okay, these poets, they got inspiration from Ben Jonson, and that's why the other historians have also given this title, the sons of Ben. Cavalier poets are also known as the sons of Ben or the tribes of Ben. Okay, now these people, Cavalier poets, they belonged to aristocratic families. Okay, many of them were the courtiers. Okay, they attended the court regularly with the king, and they spent much of their time attending the king, and they used to write poetry appreciating different qualities and strength of the king Charles the First. Okay, and mainly their whole concept which they expressed in their poetry was that life is very short, time is running faster, and we must enjoy life as much as we can. This was the common ideology of the Cavalier poets which they have expressed in their poems. Okay, before we discuss the important features of Cavalier poetry, let me tell you what is the meaning of the word Cavalier. The dictionary meaning of the word Cavalier is lack of concern and carefree person. Okay, one who is a carefree man, you can call him a Cavalier. And this title was given to these poets by other poets who were writing poetry in England during that time. Which time? Mid 17th century. Okay, these Cavalier poets, they were writing poetry against the Roundheads. Now, who were the Roundheads? Roundheads were another group of poets who were writing, who were the supporters of English Parliament. Okay, so there was a political conflict between these two parties. King Charles the First was one party, and English Parliament was the another party, political party. So there was a conflict, a political conflict between these two, and one English Parliament was supported by one group. Okay, and King Charles the First was supported by another group, and they were the Cavalier poets. The term Cavalier was used to describe the group as an insult. Okay, why? Because one who is a carefree manner, one who is an rowdy kind of uneducated person, for that person also we generally use this word Cavalier. But these Cavalier poets were not much concerned with this title which was given to them. Okay, now you see, literature is what? In literature you find action and reaction. Just like Romanticism came as a reaction against classicism, okay, and realism came as a reaction against romanticism. In the same manner, during the 17th century, these two, metaphysical poets, they came as metaphysical poetry came as a reaction against 16th century romantic poetry, and in the same manner Cavalier poetry came as a reaction against metaphysical poetry. I have presented this difference between metaphysical and Cavalier poetry. Okay, metaphysical poetry, written by John Donne, Andrew Marvell, George Herbert, they were expressing the spiritual side of human life. Okay, but on the other hand, if you read Cavalier poetry, there you find sensuousness. Okay, they talk about this worldly material aspects of life. So spiritualism and materialism, you find the difference. Moreover, in metaphysical poetry we find it very difficult to understand. Okay, why? Because they are full of far-fetched images, conceits, paradoxical sentences and words are placed together, and that's why obscurity is one of the features of metaphysical poetry. I have already uploaded another separate video on metaphysical poetry. There I have discussed these features of metaphysical poetry in detail, but obscurity is one feature. Obscurity means difficult to understand, but on the other hand, Cavalier poetry is very simple to understand. Why? Because simplicity of expression, simplicity of language is found here. Moreover, the third difference is, much amount of wit, intelligence is found in metaphysical poetry. Use of conceits, uncomparable things are compared in metaphysical poetry, but here in Cavalier poetry you find simple similes, simple comparison and simple metaphors. Okay. Metaphysical poetry was not written with any political purpose, but Cavalier poets, they were writing poetry in order to show the qualities, good qualities of their king whom they were supporting. Okay, so they had some political intention also. Metaphysical poetry on the one hand is, religious poetry. Many of the poets like John Donne, George Herbert have written religious poetry, and these Cavalier poets have nothing to do with religion and spiritualism. Okay, why? Because their poetry was highly sensuous. These poets, they were writing poetry on the theme of love, or sometimes love making, time, how the time passes faster, okay, beauty, nature, politics. These were the common subject matters on which Cavalier poets were writing poetry. Okay, and these poets, what is their ideology? If you read these 4 lines, I have taken these lines from one of the poems of Herrick. Herrick is one of the leaders of Cavalier poetry. Gather ye rose birds while ye may, old time is still a-flying, and this same flower that smiles today, tomorrow will be dying. Okay, the poet wants to express the idea that gather rose birds as much as you can today. मतलब आज आपके पास है, उसको celebrate करें. Old time is still flying. Okay, time is flying very faster, and this same flower that smiles today, आज जो flower खूबसूरत दिखता है, tomorrow will be dying. It will be withering tomorrow. Okay, so before it is just like they believe that eat the ice cream before it melts. Okay, so live the life before it ends. This was the common ideology in which they believed, and that's why these poets were also known as carefree people. Okay, because they did not care too much on moralism, too much on moral values or spiritual values. Okay, who were the major Cavalier poets? They remember these 4 names. Robert Herrick, who has written unbelievable 2,500 poems, more than that. Okay, and these poems were published in Hesperides. Okay, so 4 names: Robert Herrick, Thomas Carew, Richard Lovelace and John Suckling. These were the major Cavalier poets of England writing poetry in the mid 17th century. They reacted against the metaphysical poetry. I hope this is helpful to you, and if really it helps you, please do share this video among your friends and classmates. Thank you for watching. Next time again I'll come with a new topic from the history of English literature. Thank you for watching. Thank you.